Hi, this is DJ.
Hi, this is May.
Hi, this is Nathan.
Hi, I'm Sarah.
And you're listening to the 4D Plus podcast.
Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of the 4D Construction podcast. Today we're going to be talking about 4D and dispute resolution, and I'm joined with Sarah.
Hi.
May.
Hi.
And Nathan.
Hi.
So we all know each other from the 4D modelling group, which we've spoke about and introduced in some of our previous podcasts, but we all come at 4D from slightly different angles with a similar interest in dispute resolution. May, perhaps you introduce yourself and how you got involved in 4D in the relation with dispute resolution.
So I'm a construction lawyer, have been for about 17 years. I'm a specialist in BIM and construction technology, written various reports and on it. Actually, DJ introduced me to the group some years ago now, because he knew my interest, and there aren't, to my knowledge, that many lawyers who are involved in this area, and the rest is history, really.
Yeah, not many lawyers in my experience at all. And Nathan, how about you?
I'm a construction planner. I've been working at a company called Metaplan for the last 5 years, but I was brought on really to develop 4D for tenders and construction planning and working in the various infrastructure projects that we do. But I found that I was using it more and more in delay claims, and that's where I seem to be spending most of my time at the moment, which is it's a good thing because it gives me work, but another thing is a bit frustration because if you did 4D at the beginning, you wouldn't be having this kind of ending where we're at now.
Most definitely, and we will definitely cover that in detail in some of the other podcasts. And then finally, just moving on to Sarah, how about you?
So I got involved with the group probably through James and through DJ, and I've been using 4D for about 5 years and just using it all sorts of things. So pre-construction, through construction and claims, both as a planner and as a just general CAD monkey.
So, and for those that don't know me, I'm David John, or DJ, as most people know me. And yeah, I started looking into BIM and dispute resolution as part of research, as part of a doctorate for a dispute resolution company in 2011. I guess before we kick off, what do we mean by disputes without going into too much detail? From my perspective, a dispute normally happens when you submit a claim and a claim isn't accepted, and you go through periods of negotiation or discussions with your client and or your subcontractors to try and help resolve that. That can normally be through different mediums like adjudications, particularly in the UK, arbitrations, or even litigation, but it may be mediations as well. So we'll start with the when you should use 4D modelling for dispute resolution. I don't know, May, how about you? Would you like to kick us off with your opinions or any experiences that you've had around 4D or where you see it might be useful for dispute resolution?
Yeah, sure. I suppose it's the thing to remember is that 4D is a tool like any other, and it's a way to present information and data in an easy to understand format, particularly for people who aren't used to Gantt charts and other more, say, technical documents.
Yeah.
So, for example, an adjudicator, even a client, and I've seen it very successfully used in that regard, saying to someone, please look at these 5 files of charts and documentation, as opposed to, here, let me show you this very compelling visual of what happened. And they get the picture. However, the suitability of it depends on what stage you're at in the discussion. There's no point giving it when people don't really understand what they're arguing about in the first place, or you don't have the right information from each party. So it's not really an accurate reflection. So it's like with BIM, people shouldn't just say, oh, I'll use this because it's a good bit of tech. it's worth considering what's the end game of it.
Yeah, most definitely. And just building on that point from my perspective, Gantt charts can be very difficult to read, even for the people that sit in looking at Gantt charts all day. There might be tens of thousands of lines of activities on some of the most complex projects, which may end up in dispute. And sitting there and trying to decipher that, particularly, like you're saying, for individuals that may not have been educated or worked on construction sites, they may be lawyers by background, to try and decipher that information can be very difficult. So any tools that assist with it. I don't know about you, Nathan. What have you seen in terms of 4D, I guess, from using it for dispute resolution?
So, carrying on what you're saying, DJ, I mean, you can go into a meeting and people don't always understand how to read a Gantt chart. Plus, the other thing with Gantt charts, they tend to be in PDF. You don't know what the logic's behind them. How did it get there? You're going to have to hold that all in your mind. So same with an adjudication, and the adjudicator has to understand very complex projects that have maybe running for a few years, infrastructural projects, very complex. And he has to, she has to understand in 28 days what's just gone on in the last 5 years. And the Gantt chart kind of shows one side, but when you connect that to a 4D model, the adjudicator can see the logic. You can see it developing in front of your eyes in some ways, and the problems that were faced over a period of time. It gives it that kind of geographic location as well. So we're not having to look back at maps. We're not having to look at pictures. Rather than having reams and reams of paper and lots of Gantt charts and PDFs, it can actually just, let's look at the video. Okay, that gives us an idea. And you can have it in various levels of detail. So you don't have to have a model to begin with. I've taken models from 2D plans, and I've shown piling disruption by just drawing columns coming down which are connected to the activities within the Gantt chart. I think it's just about trying to get a point across.
Yeah. And I think just building on that, I remember when I was working in dispute resolution, we'd have adjudications arrive and some of the staff would be adjudicators, and they'd get like 20 plus boxes of paper to look through and review. And it's obviously all important. It's narrative. There's lots of records in there and so forth, but they have to build up that mental picture in their head. They have to piece it all together to get a visualization in their mind as to what happened on that project at a point in time. So I think it's a great, I guess, tool, to use that. While we focus on the tool itself, I think it's also really useful process in terms of actually bringing people together to discuss the claim or the issues, both within the organization that's making the claim or is having the dispute, and then also around the table with your clients or whatever they might be. And I don't know, Sarah, how have you got on with working with that information and getting that engagement from different people? How do you find people to be receptive to that, and how might that apply to disputes?
So I've been quite fortunate in that I've managed to use 4D on every live site I've worked at. One of the most interesting uses of 4D I think I can think of for a claim was actually trying to work out whether we had a claim. So whether there was an entitlement, to which we found very quickly there actually wasn't. So another example is, so one of the earliest uses, I think my project director at the time thought it was absolute wizardry, was just explaining that so some welfare cabins hadn't moved, so we couldn't put up some scaffolding and we couldn't get a good enough picture of it. And within half an hour, I'd mocked up exactly what the issue was, proved that the scaffold couldn't be cantilevered, and just said, right, this is the situation. These are all the things that people might say that we could use to mitigate, modelled them, and clear as day, you could see that there wasn't a way around it.
Yeah. And I imagine, without that, it'd be quite difficult to understand, or take a lot longer, right? And then you're losing time, and particularly in those short durations.
I think it's worth bearing in mind as well that a lot of the people involved in disputes, say the lawyers who are advising you in the early stages of the claim or when there's a formal dispute, really don't understand a lot of the technical side. And so asking a lawyer, do I have a claim? They're really relying on you to provide them with the understanding and the explanation and the right documents, which they then have to wade through. I had once a claim. I went through 52 boxes of files to work out whether there was a contract and whether there was a claim. And that was at the outset. I mean, that's not even progressing the claim. Whereas if you show a lawyer, look, this is what happened, they're then much easier to advise you, as Sarah said, on whether there is a good possibility and it's worth pursuing it, what the next steps are, and what the tactics.
And carrying on from what Sarah and DJ and yourself are saying, it's actually valid that it helps them to get a picture, but also, as Sarah was saying, when you coming up to dispute, you're actually checking your data. And I remember we didn't have models at this point, and I said, I just want basic models. So I sent off the data from a spreadsheet off to a modeler. They then made the model as the data was saying to do with piles. So the piles had to have 28 meters length. Well, it didn't have to be. That's what was planned, and then versus actual. And what we found was that some piles came back were half truncated. We couldn't understand why that was, and it's because the data was wrong or it was on the wrong date. We started to see piles appearing in different parts of the site that couldn't have happened, and so that actually helped us to cleanse the data to actually see not just to go back and see what it was. And what we found out was there was two drills that were going on at the time. So they started, then stopped and moved somewhere else, and it kind of like strengthens the argument, one about the data, have we got good data? And then the other thing was, does it then show the disruption? They say a picture paints 1,000 words, and that's exactly what 4D does. I
think that's really interesting and a really good point, actually. How do you have you had any experiences or pushback from, or how do you feel adjudicators, arbitrators, judges, whoever it might be, these decision makers on these disputes, how welcoming they would be to accept these models as evidence or as supporting documentation?
So one thing to bear in mind is how few disputes or claims end up going into formal proceedings. So, and I'm thinking adjudication, court, arbitration. Most things get settled either in a mediation or, more likely, the parties sitting around a table, maybe with lawyers involved, and probably having some letters going back and forth. So your presentation of your evidence as such won't be this, here's my 4D, here's my letter of claim. It'll be, here's some documents, here's some drawings, and here's a 4D as well. So it'll almost probably, in most cases, from a dispute perspective, be part of the story and part of the package of telling. And let's face it, most of us in the construction industry, we're not looking for long drawn out disputes. It usually disagreements happen whilst the project's going on, and these are people you still have to see on site and work with for years, and you just want it sorted out. And it's just, if there is something that enables both sides to understand the position, I've found most people are quite open to it. That it is, again, it's not like a court case where you're trying to win, as it were.
So my experience is that all the advice I got at the time, I was very, very junior, trying to put together a claim for it was a roof, a load of plant on a roof that wasn't installed on time, and it had gone so badly wrong that you could only really see it through pictures, but pictures didn't explain on a bird's eye view how badly it had gone wrong. So I think linking it with actual irrefutable evidence that's date stamped. So it could be programs, but even programs people get wrong, as Nathan just mentioned. Mm-hmm. So pictures worth 1,000 words, and then you take the 4D to really explain what happened from an angle that shows you exactly what you need to see, which obviously isn't possible in a photograph all the time.
Well, yeah, you lose that context, right? The photo's just a certain position, and I've waded through thousands of photographs in disputes in the past, and there'll be, you'll look at something and you don't know what floor it's on necessarily, or even what date it happened. You might be relying on some incorrect metadata or something like that. But 4D, yeah, most definitely, and linking that information. How about you, Nathan? You had any experiences with that?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of really I think the light bulb moments when you're in that adjudication, you're with the person in front of you, the two sides are there. So I've got, one example was that the adjudicator asked, they didn't want any more information, but when we actually came to the meeting, they kind of said, look, I don't fully understand what's going on. And we kind of we did a 4D for ourselves, only internally, just to identify where along this big, it's electrical works it was, putting in the new cable, and it was over, I can't remember how many kilometers it was, but it was over a long distance, and there was lots of different effects over that. And we were able to say, well, we've got this video, maybe this will help. And it wasn't, we weren't supposed to be putting any more information in. It wasn't the information, it was just presenting our side for ourselves. We wanted to fact check ourselves. And that really, suddenly both sides kind of went, oh, okay, that's how it works. And then we had a similar situation with this piling, that it's been going on for years. I mean, I've been involved in this for about 3 years now. And I think we got lost. The dispute resolution board wasn't too sure which way we were going to be going or what's happened. And we had new members joining on the resolution board. So it was that time we thought, well, let's do a 4D for ourselves to check the data. This is where we found out the piles were different. And then we were able to show what the quantum was, the difference, the time frames. We were able to put them side by side. This is what we agreed to do. This is what actually happened. And this is the kind of, because we're doing a secant piling wall, there's a certain order that we would do that, but this is what happened. And you can see this piling rig going all over the site because that's where they had access to. And suddenly, not only did they understand there's a deeper pile that needed to be done, so there's a big quantum, there was extra piles that had to be done, and it had to all be done in the same time, and we were being pushed to do them in the same time, but we weren't getting access to the site when we were supposed to be getting access to the site. And suddenly you put this all together and everyone went, oh, okay, so I thought we'd have already sorted this out in the past, but actually, no, this is still what the issue is. We're still disagreeing on time, quantum, and disruption.
So that's quite interesting. And how did you present that as information? Was that using the model? Was that videos? Was that still images in reports? Or was it a collection of that?
So it was kind of, we did a PowerPoint, which was quite a good little animation on a PowerPoint. It's just a 2D, just to show this is on the left-hand side, this is what we agreed that we were going to do, this kind of design. Then there was a design change. So on the other side of the PowerPoint, on the 2D side, we were showing this is what actually happened. So that kind of showed the process had changed, and that was just done in PowerPoint, but again, added to the front of the 4D so it looked like an animation. And then with the 4D was just a simple model that we got a model to make up, but it was very, very plain. And the idea was to show that rather than maybe 200 piles on site, we suddenly had 400 piles on site. And then, and some of them were smaller, obviously. They weren't all needed to be 28 meters long. But what it kind of did was that kind of everybody went, oh, okay. The best thing was I put a rig on each pile. So when they were working, each pile had a rig on top. And then suddenly you see this pile, rather than going around in a nice kind of order, 1, 3, 5, coming back to put the secondary piles in after the primary piles have gone in, you can actually see that suddenly they're doing all these primaries and they're doing them out of sequence. And why is that?
So I think that's a good point. I think we're all in agreement that it obviously adds value to the dispute resolution or negotiation kind of process. There's obviously two possibilities. One is when 4D has been used on the project to some shape or form, and you might be able to turn it into something suitable to show delay or disruption or whatever that might be, work it in, or it already exists on the project. But other times, there might not even be a 3D model, but you might find that 4D would support. What's your opinions on creating a 4D model when perhaps even 3D doesn't exist to support with part of the dispute resolution?
I've seen that done actually in one adjudication I was involved in. They did exactly that. This was some years ago, so this was before BIM was as widely used as it is now, and there just weren't 3D models for the project. But there was a dispute, and they did effectively back engineer a 4D model, which enabled both the adjudicator, but also all the lawyers and the other parties to understand what the position was and why the adjudicator came to the decision he did. But it certainly, I've seen it work very effectively because there's no difference between using it in that respect or using it if there are 3D models behind it. Because what you're looking at is what's the 4D telling
Yeah,
you.
and I think, particularly in 2020 versus 2011, and even before then, 2011 when I started looking at it, the cost of producing these 4D models has dropped dramatically, depending on the level of detail that you go to. The 3D modeling resource is, the skills have improved, access to the software or affordability of the software's dropped. It's still claimed as barriers, obviously, but we're not always limited with it being so out of this world that people can't get access to either 3D modelers and or 4D modelers. I don't know about you, Nathan. You're a planner by background. How do you get on with the production of 4D?
It's all about this level of detail, isn't it? And I try and keep mine very simple because I don't necessarily need people walking through my animations and birds tweeting and all these kind of fancy things that you use for Tender. I just want to get the point clearly across, the sequence of the events that happened when they happened. So it can be very simple, just to show sequence and disruption. And when we talk about it being 3D model, that was on a 2D drawing that I scanned, put it into a 4D software, and then literally made the piles in a very simple modeling program called SketchUp that most people can use. Very cheap. I think I used the free version, you know what I mean? And it was literally, it just showed the sequence, and it doesn't have to be really complicated. And it's the same with construction. You don't need all the fancy stuff on there. You just need to understand, can it be built? I need to know volume. I need to know size. I need to know where it's on site. Can it make that clearance? Can it not make that clearance? As Sarah was saying about the scaffolding, it can be blocks. I mean, we all draw on pieces of paper, and it's the same thing there. We're just trying to get a point across the sequence, where things are and where it should be at the moment in time. So my models are very simple.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's the detail that's included is what's required to demonstrate your point or your position. Right.
You can get like a Google map layer on, and it doesn't have to be to scale, because I'm not trying to build to this, I'm just trying to get a point across.
Yeah, and also, I guess building on that point, not everything that's important to a delay or disruption, claim or dispute might be graphically or physically represented, depending on how detailed your delay analysis and probably what method of delay analysis you're using as well might influence the type or the suitability of the 4D model for what you're trying to do. But some of them perhaps are more favorable or lend themselves to 4D a little bit more. So I'll throw a question out now. Does 4D have a place for all delay or disruption disputes, in your opinion? Would anyone like to have a go at answering that? Or any opinions on that?
I would say not all. And going back to my earlier point, that it's important to remember it's a tool. It's not the complete solution to everyone's problems. And it's a visual tool to present information rather than having to read 20 boxes of files or trying to analyze documents which you aren't really qualified to do. And so it depends it almost comes down to what do you want to achieve with it? Is it that you want to present information in a easier to understand way, or information from different sides? And so is there a different way that it can be provided more efficiently?
But the interesting thing that you have to differentiate is this visual tool that allows you to analyze the scope, the layout, and the specification changes that you've experienced. It doesn't tell you who's liable. You're just using it to say what happened.
Yeah.
So if we're airing our dirty laundry and saying this is how it went down, it doesn't particularly assign blame. So you need to then add that detail in, because so much time is wasted by communicating what happened. And I think if you get everyone on the same page, then you can start working out the next part.
The other thing that I found that with 4D that kind of opened my mind is that people, when they go into dispute, they're very focused on this is what happened and this is what I believe happened, and then they get this kind of mentality as a team that they think we are right, this is what happened, and it kind of comes, a narrative becomes their truth. But then I come in and I go through and I pick out a document and I go, oh, this happened then. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Well, we got data. Okay, let's have a look at the data. Oh, we got a Gantt chart. Well, let's have a look at the Gantt chart. And then you're suddenly going, oh my goodness, your logic's not there. You haven't got a Gantt chart. You haven't got data. You're believing this. And they truly, in their hearts, they believe it. They believe this is what happened. They see it from their perspective. But then when you show it from all the other evidence and you put it together in a 4D, the sequence kind of crystallizes, as we were saying, May was saying, Sarah was saying, should we really be going to resolution, or can we sort it out before?
So, why do you think that it's not being adopted as much within the dispute resolution practice?
Perhaps through lack of skill. I'm not sure if May and Nathan agree with me, but you're still seeing a skill shortage in a lot of planners.
I think a lot of it is just people don't think about it. It's like even now with BIM, with 3D modeling, people are still putting in tenders, do some BIM. In the same way, it's, oh, well, present your information. If you said to a lot of, say, lawyers, claims consultants, do you think a 4D would work for your dispute? They would have no idea what you're talking about. But then if you showed them what it was, they think this is amazing. So it is that lack of exposure and education. I agree with Sarah that obviously there is the skill set, but I think a lot of it, the availability is in the industry, but people have to go to the people assisting them with the disputes and say, maybe this tool will help. They can't necessarily expect their lawyers, claims consultants, or even their directors to understand that.
Yeah.
And I think also it depends whereabouts you are. So if you're in an adjudication, you've got 28 days to respond, so you're just trying to get the data, make sure the data's right. So you're doing, you're doing your spreadsheet checks, your pivot chart, Gantt charts, and all these kind of things you're trying to get done quickly. To add a model onto that can take time. But again, if it's just trying to show very simple things, I've done one in a week very, very quickly. The main thing is having the data there to go. So if you haven't got the Gantt chart sorted out, if you haven't got the data, then it's probably not the time to be using that.
Yeah. So I'd agree with that. And I think, well, on all those points, actually, in terms of skills and awareness and also, the timeframes to produce it. I think adding to that, just from my perspective, I think sometimes there's a fear it's going to be really expensive. Because people haven't done it before, they don't know, they can't anticipate a cost. And sometimes they may have been stung in the past, let's say, for, fancy, high-res, glossy CGI videos, rather than a working 4D model of that kind of that simulation. And, there's mountains and mountains of things I think we can talk about this. And I know that other members of our 4D modeling group want to pick up this topic of claims and disputes. So, I'm pretty confident there will be other podcasts that cover this, and we'll more than likely go into the details that we've discussed in even more detail. I think that's everything we've got time for today. I'm going to try something that we've not prepped for at all, but from each of you, if there's any one key take home from the discussions we've had today.
For me, to try and simplify things in a 4D model just makes sense. I would really encourage people to try in 4D before we get to disputes.
How about you, Sarah?
Use it preventatively, not correctively. Fail to plan to fail.
Yep, I like that. And how about you, May?
I think whenever there's a dispute or disagreement relating to delay or disruption, it's worth thinking, is 4D something that we could use to resolve this faster? But coupled with that, how are we going to educate the people involved and assisting us so that they can use it in the right way? There's no point giving them, here, let's do some 4D, give it to your claims people, and they're not going to use it in the right way through no fault of their own.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads on to my closing remark, actually. It's about, taking that awareness and understanding how you get the most value out of it. And while I believe that the presentation of the 4D in whatever format that might be is really important and really powerful, I think the process of going through creating the 4D model, bringing the team together, strengthening your narrative, understanding your position, like Sarah was saying in some of the claims that she was involved, is really, really important. And I think sometimes that doesn't get recognized enough at how great a tool it is for bringing people together, whether it's your own team or the people you're negotiating and discussing with. So I think that's everything. We've covered a lot in the time that we've had. And thanks for all listening. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Nathan. And thank you, May. Been a great session. If you've got any questions, please get in touch with us on Twitter or LinkedIn or however you can get in contact. And yeah, look out for our next podcast.